Imagine it's the coldest night you've ever faced. Your breath turns to frost as soon as it leaves your lips. The wind howls like a chorus of angry wolves, and your fingers feel like icicles ready to snap off. Now picture this. You're not alone in the freezing darkness. You're a Viking over 1,000 years ago, stuck in a tiny, drafty wooden hut surrounded by snow drifts up to your knees. No central heating, no fancy down jackets, and certainly no hot cocoa. Just you, your family, and a single pot of bubbling fat. Sounds impossible to survive, right? Yet somehow, for 30 days straight, these fierce warriors not only survived, but thrived in conditions that would make a modern polar explorer sweat buckets. The question is, how on earth did they do it? What was their secret weapon against the brutal Nordic cold? Here's the twist. It wasn't giant fur cloaks alone, nor endless fires burning bright, nor even some magic Viking blood. Instead, it might be the strangest Viking survival trick you've never heard of, a single pot of fat. Not a whole feast, not a pile of logs, but just one pot filled with mysterious fat that kept entire families warm through the darkest, coldest months. I know you're probably thinking, pot of fat. For warmth, they must have been medieval chefs on a new kind of cooking show. But buckle up, because this simple pot of fat was actually their medieval version of a 1,000-watt heater, silent, smoky, and unbelievably efficient. Let's unpack this a little. Picture inside the Viking longhouse. Thick wooden walls, animal skins hanging up for decoration and insulation, and that one pot of fat steadily simmering over the fire. The fat wasn't just food, it was a tactical thermal weapon. When heated, fat releases a steady steam, saturating the entire room with a warm, humid heat that fights off the bone-chilling cold seeping through the walls. Think about it like nature's version of Gore-Tex, but more delicious. Unlike dry heat from a campfire that vanishes in a draft, the oily vapor clung to fur robes, bedding, and even skin, locking in warmth like a cozy thermal blanket. Scientists today would call this a perfect example of latent heat retention, where the fat's molecules store and gradually release energy over hours, smoothing out temperature dips during icy nights. But here's where it gets even crazier. This pot didn't just warm the air, it actually improved their body heat from the inside out. Vikings consumed about 70 to 75% of their diet as animal fat during winter months, which literally fueled their internal furnace. Picture a modern athlete carb loading. For Vikings, it was fat loading, and it worked. Fat is an energy-dense molecule, providing over twice the calories per gram than carbs or protein. So while the pot simmered, the family ate high-fat meals that kept their metabolism cranking, generating internal warmth in ways that bread and berries alone never could. In some ways, their metabolism was revving like a high-performance engine, burning fat to fuel warmth in sub-zero temps that routinely plunged to minus 30 degrees F. Modern science actually recognizes fat metabolism as one of the most efficient human heating systems, and Vikings nailed this centuries before we understood it. Of course, all that fat and heat did something else magical. It changed how they even built their homes. Their longhouses were cleverly designed to trap and circulate the warming steam and smoke without suffocating the occupants. Imagine a giant wooden bubble, lined with thick animal pelts acting like medieval bubble wrap, insulating the interior against biting Arctic winds that could reach gusts of 50 miles per hour. The fat pot steam would rise and condense along the cold roof beams, slowly dripping back down or seeping into the thick walls, saturating them with heat that radiated back like a natural thermal battery. This wasn't just heating a room. It was engineering a microclimate inside that battered longhouse, creating a cozy oasis in otherwise brutal surroundings. It's like they gestured at nature and said, "We'll work with you, not against you." Now, you might be wondering, but wouldn't a pot of fat just make everything greasy and gross? Surprisingly, it didn't. The Vikings used animal fats with high melting points, like reindeer tallow and seal blubber, which released heat slowly and evenly without filling the air with smoke or unpleasant odors. These fats melted between 95 degrees F and 115 degrees F, just right to simmer steadily without flaming up or cooling down too fast. In modern terms, this is like a low-temperature radiator that burns clean and lasts all night long. It quietly put out just enough warmth to keep hypothermia away, but never got hot enough to spark a fire disaster. Ingenious, right? And it didn't stop there. The Vikings also mastered a quirky technique where they'd spread a thin layer of this warmed fat onto their skin before bed, effectively creating ancient hot water bottles. Imagine rubbing yourself with an oily layer that pumps out heat for hours, while simultaneously waterproofing your skin against the biting moisture that could leach away your body heat. Think of it as the original vapor barrier, long before we had fancy chemical creams or space blankets. Historians actually found traces of these fat rubs on Viking burial sites, indicating not just practicality but deep cultural significance. Protection from cold was sacred, almost ritualistic. But here's the catch. They couldn't just rely on that one pot to do all the work. The fat needed a supporting cast of tricks to hold the warmth hostage. For instance, Vikings kept their children and elderly huddled close, turning their collective body heat into a shared defense against the frost. In fact, family clusters inside longhouses could raise interior temperatures by as much as 10 to 15 degrees Fahrenheit compared to outside. The pot of fat was a heat amplifier, and human bodies were the fuel. In a way, they created a prehistoric version of a heat-sharing communal blanket, with every breath and heartbeat contributing to that precious interior warmth. But all that warmth would vanish if the fat pot was left unattended or the fire died down too quickly. That's where their daily routines were crafted around managing heat like a sacred resource. They'd rotate shifts tending the fire and stirring the fat pot, making sure it simmered steadily without burning. Imagine the longhouse as a living organism, pulsing to the rhythm of crackling embers and bubbling fat. Every ember counted toward family survival. This wasn't just about warmth. It was about vigilance, community, and endurance. And even with all this, the Vikings faced another huge challenge. The cold, damp air inside longhouses could make the heat feel less effective. That's when their clothing turned into survival superheroes. Layers of wool and reindeer hide acted like an ancient form of bubble wrap, trapping the steam from the fat pot close to the skin. Plus, their fur pelts absorbed tiny drops of heated fat vapor, adding a silky, warm barrier. If you imagine a modern insulated jacket soaked in just enough moisture to create a breathable heat layer without getting soggy, you're getting close. This combination of heated fat vapor, layered pelts, and close body contact created a micro-ecosystem of warmth that could sell insurance against frostbite. Believe it or not, the fat pot method was so reliable that it even helped Vikings store food longer through cold months. The steam saturated the air and created an environment where mold and bacteria struggled to thrive on salted meats and fish caches. This warm humidity effect preserved their winter larders much better than dry heat ever could. So this pot of fat was actually a multi-tool, a heat source, a preservation agent, and a comfort enhancer all rolled in one. In modern terms, it's as if a single household appliance doubled as a sous chef, heater, and humidifier. But there's a twist to this story we can't ignore. The efficiency of their pot depended on the type of fat and the firewood. Vikings were meticulous about which logs could burn steady enough to maintain the fat's gentle simmer without sudden flare-ups. They often used slow-burning hardwoods like birch or oak, which held a steady temperature in the 200 to 300 degrees Fahrenheit range. That's just enough heat to liquefy tallow perfectly, but not enough to vaporize the precious oils. If they burned softwoods or pine, the flame got too hot and destroyed the fat's potent warmth. It's like brewing the perfect cup of tea, too hot, and it's bitter, too cold, and it's pointless. So, if you've been wondering how Vikings managed to keep entire families warm for a full month with just one pot of fat simmering in a humble hut, now you have the secret. It was an elegant marriage of dietary science, thermal physics, environmental engineering, and layer upon layer of ingenious tactics that worked in unison. A single pot of fat wasn't just an ingredient. It was the heart of an entire survival system that turned the harshest winters into bearable homecomings. But now comes the part that flips our understanding upside down. Because this fat pot method was only the beginning. It wasn't just Vikings cooking with fat. They were mastering a sophisticated thermal economy that transformed their entire lifestyle. And we haven't even gotten to the part where it comes to life in their clothing, tools, and even nighttime routines. Stay with me, because what's next will challenge everything you thought you knew about ancient survival, and maybe even leave you craving a slice of Viking life. With a side of hot tallow, of course. Now, here's the part that really turns heads. This wasn't just about a pot of fat sitting quietly on the fire. It was a whole system of heat management that extended beyond the hearth and into every corner of Viking life. Imagine their survival strategy like a living, breathing thermostat, a cycle of heat production, preservation, and sharing that depended on precision, timing, and teamwork. One pot, one flame, and an entire family thriving in a frozen wasteland. Let me break down the next layers of this ancient thermal genius. First up, think about the fat pot as a slow cooker, but not for dinner. This simmering cauldron actually created what we'd now call a microclimate inside the longhouse. As the fat gently boiled, it released a slow haze of warm vapor that hung in the cold air, saturating everything from skins to thatch roofs. This vapor wasn't just warmth, it was moisture-laden heat, which is far more effective than dry heat at making your skin feel warm. Think of stepping into a sauna with steam wrapping around you, instead of the dry, itchy heat of a campfire's blaze. Vikings knew this well. The humidity their pot generated ranged from 40% to 60%, the sweet spot to prevent heat loss through evaporative cooling, the scientific term for why our bodies shiver and get frostbite in the first place. This was their medieval humidifier, but instead of electronics, it was fueled by raw animal fat. But the brilliance didn't stop there. Picture this: longhouse walls lined with sod and turf packed thick enough to be 2 feet deep. That's right, thick, living insulation that soaked up heat during the day and released it slowly all night, like nature's thermal battery. The fat pot steam seeped into these walls, slightly raising their internal temperature by as much as 15 degrees F, smoothing out extreme cold snaps that could drop beyond minus 30 degrees F. It's as if they had indoor radiators made of Earth itself, cleverly engineered without any modern tech. The fat's latent heat release worked hand in hand with these insulated walls to keep drafts and chills at bay. Imagine the walls breathing warmth just from the simmering fat vapor. Modern passive solar homes mimic this effect, but Vikings nailed it through hard-won experience and pure ingenuity. And here's where it gets even more fascinating. The fat pot created a kind of air circulation system inside the longhouse. Warmer air naturally rises, but cold pockets formed near the floor. To solve this, Vikings used low wooden benches or platforms for sleeping, elevating themselves 2 feet above the ground where cold air pooled. This wasn't just about comfort, it was life or death. Sleeping elevated trapped heat rising from the simmering fat below. Think of it like an ancient heat exchanger, using convection currents to circulate warmer air, avoiding cold spots that sap body heat. Pretty smart for a society without HVAC units. This small architectural tweak plus the warming vapor meant the inside could stay a consistent 40 degrees F or higher, while outside plunged well below freezing. But even that wasn't enough. The Vikings had one more genius trick up their sleeves. Their clothing acted like wearable heat traps enhanced by the fat itself. Before crawling into bed, family members would rub fractions of that same tallow grease on exposed skin, especially their hands, faces, and feet. Imagine it like layering skin with a breathable, heat-retaining sealant. This not only prevented moisture from evaporating, keeping the body insulated, but also gave their clothes a subtle sheen that locked in the fat vapor's warmth. Their furs and hides absorbed tiny droplets of vapor, transforming them into dynamic insulation layers that adapted to the indoor climate. Think of it as medieval Gore-Tex infused with hydrating oils, keeping the chilling moisture out but letting sweat escape, perfect for avoiding the clammy chills that kill. Plus, this grease barrier had a secondary benefit. It protected against the biting wind and prevented skin from cracking in freezing dry air. This blend of natural chemistry and clothing technology was centuries ahead of its time. All these measures together made something rare, a sustainable heating system that didn't rely on endless wood or fuel, priceless in the dense, remote Nordic forests where timber could quickly become scarce if abused. They used their limited firewood sparingly, maintaining the fire at steady 250 to 300 degrees F, so that the fat melted slowly without wasting precious heat or burning brittle fats. If the fire blazed too hot, say above 350 degrees F, it would burn the fat's molecules too fast, generating more smoke and leaving harsh residues. Instead, the Vikings mastered a delicate balance, keeping the pot simmering for hours, day after day, turning that lone pot into a warming engine. It's like their own version of a fuel-efficient space heater, but fueled by nature's own fats. Now you might think, okay, clever Vikings, but what about the pot itself? How did it last a month without cracking or smoking out the whole hut? Good question. They crafted these fat pots out of iron or thick, durable ceramics specially designed to withstand extended heat cycles without cracking. These pots often held 5 to 7 liters of fat, just enough to keep a longhouse of 6-10 people warm. The controlled simmer meant the pot never boiled over or splattered grease everywhere. It was a kitchen appliance, a heater, and an essential tool all rolled into one, maintained daily like a family heirloom. In a way, the pot was the heartbeat of the household. Neglected it, and the entire warmth system collapsed. But as if that wasn't enough, Vikings' use of fat extended even into their daily routines. Beyond just survival, the warming pot was a social anchor, gathering family members around the hearth not only to eat, but to share stories, plan hunts, and celebrate rituals. Close proximity around the pot maximized combined body heat, creating an interpersonal warmth that science today knows can add as much as 7-10 degrees F to ambient temperature. It fostered a culture where physical closeness was essential, blending human connection with survival in a brutal environment. It's a reminder that warmth isn't just chemical or physical, it's emotional too. And as temperatures reached their zenith in the dead of winter, the fat pot's glow took on a near mystical quality. The amber flicker reflected on wooden beams, the soft hiss of melted fat was the soundtrack of survival, and the thick steam curved gently around fur-lined beds. The Vikings' nocturnal rituals included topping off the fat pot, so it simmered steadily while they slept, ensuring the internal furnace of the house never went dark. Imagine that, the entire family cocooned in a warm bubble generated from a single humble pot, beating back the Arctic cold one simmer at a time. So what can we take from this ancient trick? Beyond its raw survival value, the Viking fat pot teaches us about resilience, innovation, and the power of working with natural resources rather than fighting them. In today's world of instant heating and disposable tech, we often forget that warmth, genuine, sustaining warmth, comes from balance, timing, and respect for the elements. The Vikings remind us that sometimes the simplest tools and methods, when combined with human ingenuity and community, are more powerful than any gadget. Today, researchers even look to this old-world knowledge for sustainable heating solutions. The principle of latent heat retention, passive insulation, and humid heat circulation inspired by Viking longhouses is now informing energy-efficient building designs. From eco-friendly homes in Scandinavia to experimental thermal systems worldwide, that single pot of fat wasn't just a relic. It was an ancient prototype of sustainable living in harmony with the environment. So next time you complain about your thermostat or your high electricity bill, think about those Vikings huddled tight, fueled by fat and fire, baking warmth into every breath and heartbeat, turning one pot of melting tallow into a fortress against the frozen night. In the end, surviving 30 days or more in the savage Nordic winter wasn't just about brute strength or ferocity. It was about science, strategy, and solidarity. Every ounce of fat simmered, every layer of fur worn, and every cheerful story told by the amber light was a testament to human will and wisdom. Their legacy isn't just about conquering lands, it's about conquering the cold together. That pot of fat, simmering quietly over a sacred flame, was more than sustenance. It was survival, community, and comfort. It was the warmth that held families close, the flicker of hope against endless frost, and the invisible ember of Viking resilience passed down through the ages. Because sometimes, all it takes is one pot, one flame, and the will to keep the cold at bay, to turn the harshest night into a living testament of human endurance.